Welcome everyone to another very exciting presentation here on the Living Theosophy channel. She is an absolute favorite and we are in for an incredible treat tonight. She is not one for fanfaring or trumpet blaring, she's not, but she surely is a powerhouse of dedication and pure unselfish love. Tonight, we welcome back a cherished and absolute favorite, a tireless and devoted student of Theosophy. It's the one and only Petra Meyer. Petra is the president of the Blavatsky Lodge London, and she moved to the UK from Germany in 1984. She joined the Theosophical Society in London in 1991 and the Blavatsky Lodge in 1992. She has been presiding over all the goings-on there since 2017. She is refreshingly humble and always reiterates that Theosophy is not about the individual, as the spotlight is always to remain on the teachings. But to me and worldwide, Petra and her brilliant work is a very, very big deal. So we'll be live in the chat. This has been pre-recorded, but we will be there. I'll be there being able to talk with you. So we ask you, please, please, please comment, please chat if you wish. And please, please, if you enjoy what you see here, please like and subscribe. It's very important that these teachings get out into the world where they need to be. So tonight we get to spend with Petra Meyer on sentient nature and its hidden wonders. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back Petra. Welcome, sweetheart.
Thank you very much, Anne. That was a very, very kind introduction. Well, the wonders of sentient nature are revealed to us on an ever-increasing scale, confirming the ancient theosophical teachings. There is an Indian axiom from Buddhist sources which says, silence isn't empty. It is full of answers. As there is sound in nature which is inaudible, so there is color which is invisible, but which can be heard. The creative force at work in its incessant task of transformation produces color, sound, and numbers in the shape of rates of vibrations, which compound and dissociate the atoms and molecules. Though invisible and inaudible to us in detail, yet the synthesis of the whole becomes audible to us on the material plane. It is that which the Chinese call the great tone, or kung. It is, even by scientific confession, the actual tonic of nature, held by musicians to be the middle far of the keyboard of a piano. We hear it distinctly in the voice of nature, in the roaring of the ocean, in the sound of the foliage of a great forest, in the distant roar of the great city, in the wind, the tempest, and the storm. In short, in everything in nature which has a voice or produces sound. To the hearing of all who hearken, it culminates in the single definite tone of an unappreciable speech, which, as said, is F or fa on the diatonic scale, says Madame Blavatsky. In Science World, we can read, when sound waves move through the air, each air molecule vibrates back and forth, hitting the air molecule next to it, which then also vibrates back and forth. When these vibrations are fast or have high frequency, we hear a high tone. When vibrations are slower, we hear a lower tone. Sounds affect our bodies, minds, and spirit in different dimensions. The vibrations of singing bowls, for example, projected onto and into a human body, through air or direct contact, promote a state of natural equilibrium called cell homeostasis, neutralizing any physical or emotional strains. And in Science for Students, it says, at one frequency, the sound waves may feel like raindrops falling on your hand. At a higher frequency, they may feel like foam. The amplitude measures how compressed the waves are compared to the air around them. In addition to hearing sound waves, you can also sometimes feel them. If you stand in front of a loudspeaker at a rock concert, you will definitely be able to feel the pulsing sensation of the sound waves as they hit your body. And in a moment of science, it says, unlike waves on a lake, sound waves don't really travel up and down. Instead, they are more likely like layers of high and low pressure traveling outward in all directions. Each wave consists of a layer of high pressure, followed by a layer of low pressure. The bigger the difference between the high pressure and the low pressure, the louder the sound. But sound waves don't just travel in air. They travel through whatever they encounter, including your body. So when you listen to loud music, your whole body alternates between high and low pressure, just like the air around it. It is well known that by using sound, we transmit data. Everything from bird chirps to human language can be considered as a form of data over sound. Does that also apply to the plant kingdom? Are plants really silent? Or do they communicate among themselves and even with humans by sound vibrations? Do they have feelings and intelligence? And can they even form images of their surroundings? Theosophy teaches us that the different variations of plants are the broken rays of the one ray. As the ray passes through the 7 planes, it is broken on every plane into thousands and millions of rays down to the world of forms. Every ray breaking into an intelligence on its own plane, so that we see every plant has an intelligence, or its own purpose of life, so to say, and its own free will to a degree. This is how I, at any rate, understand it, says HBB. A plant can be receptive or non-receptive, though every plant without an exception feels and has a consciousness of its own. If plants are conscious, can they communicate? And how would they be able to do it? Dr. Monica Gagliano was a marine animal ecologist, spending her professional life in the waters of the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, studying at one time the private life and reproductive output of a little damselfish called Ambon. Just after a week in the vicinity, they knew her and snuggled comfortably inside her opened hand when her fingers gently curled around their scaly bodies and then opened again. Today, she vividly remembers the last day of her studies, when she went into the water to say goodbye to them before returning in the afternoon to capture some. And, according to scientific protocol, kill them for study in her laboratory. A chilling sensation filled her when none of them was in sight when she returned in the afternoon, let alone approach her. At that moment, she knew that they knew. She suddenly felt the blood of all past killings she had done in the name of science, and a dreadful feeling of guilt flooded her heart. And she knew instantly that she would never be able to kill again, that there was no scientific question significant enough that could justify the killing of another living being. She also immediately realized that it would be impossible to continue her scientific research without slaughter. And her career as an animal scientist ended right there and then, and a new vocation as a plant scientist was about to start. In May 2013, Dr. Gagliano moved to the laboratory of Professor Stefano Mancuso, a leading authority in the field of plant neurobiology at the University of Florence in Italy, where the signaling and communication at all levels of biological organizations is explored. The purpose of her visit was to deepen her knowledge about the behavior of the plant world. After lengthy discussions, they agreed on some experiment to prove what many had believed for some time, that plants are equipped with an effective memory. The chosen plant for this experiment was a very sensitive Mimosa pudica, a creeping perennial flowering plant often grown for its curiosity value, because its leaves fold inward and droop when touched or shaken, defending itself from harm, reopening again a few minutes later and realizing that there was no immediate danger. For her experiment, Dr. Gagliano put several of these plants into jars and dropped them from the height of about 4 inches onto a soft ground. The results were immediately exciting. The leaves folded inwards and drooped almost instantaneously. But after a series of repetitions, about 7 to 8, the plants stopped closing their leaves, ignoring every subsequent fold. Dr. Gagliano and her colleagues had to find out now if that was simply due to fatigue or if the plants had understood there was nothing to fear from the drop. In the next experiment, the plants were shaken horizontally, and they immediately responded to the new stimulus in their old way, closing and drooping their leaves. They had obviously recognized a shift in motion, which was unfamiliar. The next step was to find out how long the memory of that drooping experience as not being dangerous would last. Being left undisturbed for a while, the experiment was periodically repeated and the result exceeded all expectations. Mimosa pudica remembered for more than 40 days, a very long time compared with the standard memory span of many insects and several other superior animals, confirmed the scientists. In his book, The Revolutionary Genius of Plants, A New Understanding of Plant Intelligence and Behavior, Professor Stefano Mancuso also describes the amazing mimicry ability of plants, often surpassing those of animals, to allow their survival in their surrounding environment, the ability of exchanging information, and that they even have some kind of visual capacity due to the cells of the epidermis. Very often the epidermis of a plant is convex, like a lens, and could conceivably convey the images of surrounding plants to the underlying cellular layer. The most talented plant in mimicry seems to be the vine Bocchilla trifoliolata, growing in the rainforests of Chile and Argentina, which is almost like a chameleon by shape-shifting the form of its leaves to match its surroundings, hiding from predators. But that is not all. The structure of certain plants also inspired architects. The most famous example is Crystal Palace. In 1851, the first great exhibition was planned in London. To host it properly, a colossal structure had to be built inside Hyde Park, suitable for welcoming delegates from around the world, as well as millions of spectators, reflecting the greatness of the British Empire. Since it was not supposed to be a permanent structure, it had to be built quickly, functional, and with minimal expense. Students of architecture across Europe took part in the competition. The commission received 245 proposals, and after a long process of analysis, rejected them all, which was unexpected. The evaluation had taken a lot of time, and there were only a few months left to host the great exhibition, and Great Britain ran the risk of a sensational embarrassment before the whole world. In this tense atmosphere, Joseph Paxton, the head gardener of William Cavendish, 6th Duke of Devonshire, came to the rescue. He had the revolutionary idea of building a huge glass and cast iron structure using prefabricated units. British technology had already evolved sufficiently at that time to make rapid production of tens of thousands units possible. Thus, by gradually adding new elements, the initial structure could be extended to infinity. If the whole thing would be dismantled again at the end of the exhibition, the various parts could easily be put together for another use. It was in effect a colossal erection of a greenhouse, which Paxton had already designed on a smaller scale to protect exotic plants against the cold British weather. But a building of this enormous size had to comply with strict structural requirements. And in addition, it had to be completed on schedule and on a low cost. And that is where Paxton's second ingenious intuition came in, due to his extraordinary passion for botany, to mimic the nervation of the Victoria Amazonica leaves to create large arched vaults. Victoria Amazonica is the largest of the water lily family, a national flower of Guyana and tropical South America. Its very large green leaves lie flat on the water's surface with raised edges and can grow up to 3 meters in diameter on a stalk, up to 8 meters in length. If properly distributed, a leaf can withstand a load of nearly 100 pounds without breaking or deforming, because on its underside it is equipped with spines, which serve as a protection against large aquatic herbivores, marine mammals. Paxton's design of enormous dimensions, according to the radical structure of the Victoria Amazonica, made it possible to complete the building in just 4 months. And London was ready to host the first great exhibition with pomp and grandeur, and left more than 14,000 exhibitors from all over the world, as well as 5 million visitors, speechless. Among them Charles Darwin, Charles Dickens, Charlotte Bronte, George Eliot, and Alfred Tennyson. The proceeds from the ticket sale were used for the construction of the Victoria and Albert Museum, the Science Museum, and the National History Museum, thanks to the Victoria Amazonica. And Paxton was made a baronet. As the soul of the world permeates the whole cosmos, beasts must have in them something divine, said Clement of Alexandria in the Stromata. This is also the doctrine of Buddhists and the Hermetists, that Manu endows with a living soul even plants and the tiniest blades of grass. But who is Manu? Is it possible to say that Manu is an individuality? HPB was asked by her students, and the answer was, in an abstract sense, certainly not. But it is possible to apply an analogy. Manu is the synthesis, perhaps, of the Manasa, or the Manasa Putra, sons of mind, whose collectivity is the eternal mind. And he is a single consciousness in the same sense that while all the different cells of which the human body is composed are different and of varying consciousnesses, there is still a unit of consciousness, which is a man. But this unit, so to say, is not a single consciousness. It is a reflection of thousands and millions of consciousnesses which a man has absorbed. Manu is not truly an individuality. It is the whole of mankind. The hidden world of brotherhood in the plant kingdom was also thoroughly investigated by the German forester Peter Wohleben in his book, The Hidden Life of Trees, where he wrote that trees in a forest act as a unity, feeding and protecting each other from the extremes of weather and pests. They can store plenty of water to keep the environment moist, which a single tree on its own could never achieve. Even sick or injured trees are supported in this way, helping with their recovery. Trees communicate and care for each other in several different ways, by smell, for example. 4 decades ago in the savannas of Africa, it was discovered that umbrella acacias do not like to be eaten at all by giraffes. And not only do they produce within minutes toxins in their leaves, but also extrude a gas, ethylene in this case, to warn their neighbors. Giraffes know this and avoid all the trees within an area of about 100 meters. That is how far the smell can be distributed before they start eating again beyond that distance, or they proceed with their aim against the wind. Trees do not only spread their perfumes for warning reasons. Combined with the color of their blossoms, they attract the bees to the nectar, which cause a much needed pollination at the same time. They can even discern the saliva from different insects, feed on their leaves and produce a smell that attracts specific enemies that feeds on those plagues. Oaks, on the other hand, and poisonous tannic acids into their bark and leaves, which either kill the insects or cause a bitter taste and unpleasant taste to chase their tormentors away. Warning messages are also sent via the root system, about 1 centimeter per second. Since this is not very fast, trees make the best use of fungi as transmitters as well. Their thin threads penetrating the ground act similar to the connection of the internet, says Wohlleben. 1 teaspoon of forest soil contains many meters of these hyphens. Just 1 fungi can develop over a few centuries a network that spreads through the whole forest. But this is not all. Trees and other plants can even communicate via electrical impulses through a kind of nerve cells at the tips of their roots. Dr. Gagliano from the University of Western Australia, whom we have mentioned before, and her colleagues tested the soil of different sprouts and could very soon register a faint noise coming from the roots at a frequencies of 220 Hertz. The roots of other sprouts that were not immediately involved in their test responded promptly, turning their tips into that very direction, as if they could hear these sound vibrations. Science is already talking about a wood wide web that penetrates our forest, says Wohlleben. In her book, Thus Spoke the Plant, Dr. Gagliano describes how she learned to communicate with plants by shamanic methods on an ultrasonic level. Her university had organized a series of workshops to assist researchers like her. A wide range of applicants were asked to write a succinct 1-paragraph summary of their field of investigation, which could be comprehensible to non-specialists. This summary would be read to the group to provide feedback and comments. When Dr. Gagliano's research officer heard that she was going to write a proposal on understanding sound communications in plants, she was told that this was nothing other than career suicide. But her determination was unshaken, because what she was about to present had its foundation in personal experience. It was not a theoretical speculation. When it was her turn to speak, she was met with a scornful remark from one of her colleagues. "Is this a joke? That is not science." With great arrogance, he expressed his mockery blatantly. And Monica knew he was not alone with his opinion, although others seemed to prefer to be silent. But then the unexpected happened. It was one of her friends who found out about the amazing news first and had sent her an email with a link to the Australian Research Council funding, where she had just been awarded a 3-year research fellowship for her plant investigation. She was overwhelmed and in total disbelief, mixed with gratitude. Today, Dr. Monica Gagliano is a leading expert in the realm of bioacoustics, research associate professor in evolutionary ecology at the Biological Intelligence Laboratory, a research associate professor at the University of Western Australia, and research affiliate at the Sydney Environment Institute, University of Sydney. Plant bioacoustics is still a newly emerging field of plant communication. Plants produce sound waves in the lower end of the audio range, as well as an overabundance of ultrasonic sound says Dr. Gagliano. By capturing the signals emitted by plants under different environmental conditions, I am exploring the ecological significance of these sounds to communication among plants and between plants and other organisms. The results from her investigation into bioacoustics is now well confirmed by other research centers like the Tel Aviv University in Israel. In times of intense stress, people sometimes let out their fear with a sequel of screams or noises. And a newly study suggests that plants might do the same. A team of scientists placed microphones near stressed tomato and tobacco plants. The instruments picked up the crop's ultrasonic sequels from about 4 inches or 10 centimeters away. The noise is a range of 20 to 100 kilohertz, a volume that could feasibly be detected by some organisms from up to several meters away. Under stress, tomato and tobacco plants, when deprived of water, for example, or if their stems are being cut, send out sound vibrations. The recordings of the response with a microphone showed that in both cases the plants began to emit ultrasonic sounds which could convey their distress to other plants and organisms in the immediate vicinity. Plants that had no immediate environmental threat or damage released less than 1 ultrasonic sound per hour. Ultrasonic sounds are sound waves have a frequency higher than the upper audio limit of human hearing. Ultrasound is not different from normal sound in its physical properties, except that humans cannot hear it. This limit varies from person to person and is approximately 20 kilohertz in healthy young adults. Dr. Gagliano believes, like many scientists and environmentalists do, that in order to save the planet, we have to understand ourselves as part of the natural world. It's just that she also believes the plants themselves can speak to this point. And she wrote, Oringam means thank you for listening in the language of the plants. It is not a word as we humans understand it, because its meaning cannot be spoken nor can it be heard. However, we can experience it by feeling with our bodies and listening to what our ears cannot hear. When we learn to listen to plants without the need to hear them speak, a language that we have forgotten emerges. It is a language beyond words, one that does not wonder or pretend or mislead. It is a language that conveys its rich and meaningful expression by bypassing the household of our mind, directly connecting one spirit to another. I want people to realize that the world is full of magic, but not as something only some people can do, or something that is outside of this world, she said. No, it's all here. As environmental collapse looms, we have never known so much about life on Earth, how extraordinary and intricate it all is, and how loose the boundary where it ends and we begins, she says. In summer 2019, Dr. Gagliano sat on a sold-out panel called Intelligence Without Brains at the World Science Festival. She spoke about plants with pointed familiarity. In her telling, they became jaunty little characters. She used pronouns like he and they, never it. A young woman later asked her how her scientific work has changed her understanding of the world, and she answered, the main difference is that I used to live in a world of objects, and now I live in a world of subjects. There were murmurs of approval, and so I am never alone. Whatever quits the laya or homogeneous latent state becomes active conscious life. Individual consciousness emanates and returns into absolute consciousness, which is eternal motion, says an esoteric axiom. In her great article, Psychic and Noetic Action, first published in Lucifer, Volume 7 in October 1890, Madame Blavatsky gives a very detailed outline of the two different aspects of consciousness, where she confirms that every phenomenon in the visible universe has its genesis in cosmic motion, which is called the great breath in the secret doctrine, producing sound at the same time, beginningless and endless, or the eternal life, the basis and genesis of the subjective and objective universe, of which molecular motion is the lowest and most material of its finite manifestation. Occultism regards every atom as an independent entity, and every cell as a conscious unit. As soon as atoms group to form cells, the latter will become endowed with consciousness of its own kind, and that memory has its seat in every organ in the body. So where then does consciousness of its own kind start? In 1973, the Norwegian philosopher and mountaineer Oneness introduced the phrase deep ecology to environmental literature. This term considers the world as an integrated whole rather than a dissociated collection of parts, and recognizes the fundamental interdependence of all phenomena, regarding human life as just one of many components of a global ecosystem. It is a systems view about interconnections and relationships with all forms of life, seeing the world as a living network and not as a machine. Scientists have concluded that prokaryote, a combination of two Greek words pro before and karyon, nut or kernel, are single-celled life forms without a nucleus to contain their DNA, like a bacterial cell, like we can see on the right side. The DNA is spread in the whole cell. They preceded the more complex eukaryotes, a Greek term for true nucleus, which are found in the cells of plants, animals, and fungi. These challenging questions were studied and addressed by the two Chilean scientists, Dr. Umberto Maturana and Dr. Francisco Varela. They coined a new word for what defines a living or vital system, autopoiesis, a combination of the two Greek terms auto, which means self, referring to the autonomy of a self-organizing system, and poiesis, sharing the same Greek root as the word poetry, which means making. Autopoiesis therefore means self-making, a peculiar closure of living systems, which are alive and maintain themselves metabolically, whether they succeed in reproduction or not. Unlike machines whose governing functions are embedded by human designers. Organisms, on the other hand, are self-governing. Autopoietic emphasizes life's maintenance of its own identity, its cybernetic self-relatedness, and its ability to make more of itself. Cybernetic is a science of communication and automatic control of systems. Living beings maintain their form by the continuous exchange and flow of chemical components. Cellular autopoietic systems are bounded by a dynamic material which is made by the system itself. All life on Earth in an autopoietic system need a supply of water in its liquid state, or self-maintenance of their parts, requiring carbon, nitrogen, hydrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur. The smallest autopoietic system on Earth is a living bacterial cell. For example, viruses, for example, do not even in principle behave as an autopoietic system. They require cells to live in for their continuity and duplication, to metabolize and survive. The pattern of organization of a living system is always a network pattern. The key characteristic of a living network is that it continually produces itself. An autopoietic network creates its own boundary, which defines the cell as a distinct system, while being an active part of the network. It is open to the flow of energy. Its order and behavior are not imposed by the environment, but are established by the system itself. Through the interaction with the environment, living organisms continually renew themselves, using energy and resources from the environment for that purpose. The continual self-making includes the ability to form new structures and new patterns of behavior. If these processes stop, so does the whole organization. As we have heard before, Madame Blavatsky says as well, this is a fundamental axiom of occultism, which regards every atom as an independent entity and every cell as a conscious unit. It explains that no sooner do atoms group to form cells than the latter become endowed with consciousness, each of its own kind, and with free will to act within the limits of law. Every cell in the human body as in every animal, is endowed with its own peculiar discrimination, instinct, and, speaking relatively, with intelligence, says HBB. Dr. Maturana's and Dr. Varela's concept of what the nature of life and cognition is was called later on the Santiago Theory. According to this theory, the brain is not necessary to exist. A bacterium or a plant has no brain, but it has a mind. The Santiago Theory provides a coherent scientific network that mind and matter no longer appear as two separate categories, but are seen as merely different aspects or dimensions of the same phenomenon of life. As the soul of the world permeates the whole cosmos, even beasts must have in them something divine. As we have heard before, Manu endows with a living soul even the plants and the tiniest blades of grass. Plants have mystical properties in a most wonderful degree, says HBB. Most of this wisdom is now lost to European science. This has changed dramatically over the last century. Since the early days of biology, philosophers and scientists have noticed that living forms mysteriously combine the stability of structure with the fluid change. They depend on a constant flow of matter through them. They transform the materials on which they feed to maintain their activities to grow, develop, reproduce, and evolve. Being open systems, all organisms in the ecosystem produce wastes. But what is waste for one species is food for another. Wastes are continually recycled so that the ecosystem as a whole remains without waste. Madame Blavatsky says something similar in her article, The Fall of Ideals, that the protein or ever-changing part of nature around man, where every particle is incessantly transformed, the harmonious body still remains. The word forest is singular, yet it is the term to express the idea of thousands or even millions of trees of different kinds. So in Greek mythology, where the whole earth is described as a living interdependent organism called Gaia, which the atmospheric scientist James Lovelock brought into focus again. Lovelock was invited by NASA to help them design instruments for the detection of life on Mars. Space flights in the 1960s, for example, had enabled human beings for the first time to actually look at our planet from outer space, perceiving it as an integrated whole. The perception of Earth in all its beauty, a blue and white globe floating in the deep darkness of space, had moved astronauts deeply, and several have declared that it was a profound spiritual experience that forever changed their relationship to the Earth. Lovelock assumed that life on any planet would use the atmosphere and oceans as a fluid media for raw materials and waste products. Therefore, one might be able to detect the existence of life by analyzing the chemical compositions of the planet's atmosphere. This was dramatically confirmed when he and his colleague Diane Hitchcock compared the systemic analysis of the Martian and Earth's atmosphere. They were strikingly different. Today, there are no more chemical reactions on Mars. There's complete chemical equilibrium in the Martian atmosphere. On Earth, it is exactly the opposite. Its atmosphere contains gases like oxygen and methane, which are likely to react with each other due to the presence of life on Earth. Plants constantly produce oxygen and other organisms produce other gases. The atmospheric gases are continually being replenished while they undergo chemical reactions, and that the self-regulating processes involve organisms in the biosphere. These feedback loops link together living and non-living systems. We can no longer think of rocks, animals, and plants as being separate, they say. The Gaia theory shows that there's a tight interlocking between the planet's living parts, plants, microorganisms, and animals, and its non-living parts like rocks, crystals, etc. According to the Gaia theory, life creates the conditions for its own existence. Life makes, forms, and changes the environment to which it adapts. Then that environment feeds back on the life that is changing, acting, and growing in it. Lovelock came up with an ingenious mathematical model representing a very simplified Gaian system, which he called Daisy World. Daisy World is a hypothetical planet proposed by James Lovelock and Andrew Watson to illustrate the Gaia Hypothesis. This hypothesis states that living organisms interact with their inorganic surroundings, creating a self-regulating system that can maintain the condition for life on the planet. The planet's surface is comprised of white daisies, black daisies, and a bare ground. White daisies grow best in a warm climate, but they reflect light and make the planet colder. On the other side, black daisies prefer a cold climate, but absorb light and consequently make the planet warmer. These feedbacks of the constant cyclical interaction keeps the temperature constant, even when the solar energy changes, making life possible on Earth for more than 5.6 billion years now. The classical theory of evolution is the idea that organisms will gradually adapt to their environment until they reach a fit that is good enough for survival and reproduction. But in the new systems view, by contrast, evolutionary change is seen as a result of life's inherent tendency to create novelty, which may or not be accompanied by adaptation to changing environmental conditions. During billions of years, bacteria continually transformed the Earth's surface and atmosphere, and in doing so, invented all of life's essential biotechnologies. We are now beginning to see continual cooperation and mutual interdependence among all forms of life as central aspects of evolution. The American biologist and evolutionary scientist Lynn Margulis expressed it like this: life did not take over the globe by combat, but by networking. One of the first bacterial inventions was fermentation, the breaking down of sugars and conversion into ATP molecules, short for adenosine triphosphate, that are able to store and transport chemical energy within cells that fuel all cellular processes. Some of the fermenters also developed the ability to absorb nitrogen gas from the air and convert it into various organic compounds. Since nitrogen is an ingredient of the proteins in all cells, all living organisms today depend on the nitrogen-fixing bacteria for their survival. The secret doctrine describes a similar fermentation process, that which involves oxygen. Certain germ cells, such as those of yeast, develop and multiply in air. But when deprived of it, they will adapt themselves to life without air and become ferments, absorbing oxygen from substances coming into contact with them, and thereby ruining the latter. The cells in fruit, when lacking free oxygen, act as ferments and stimulate fermentation. Therefore, the vegetable cell manifests, in this case, its life as an anaerobic or absence of oxygen being. Life, therefore, is everywhere in the universe, and occultism teaches us it is also in the atom. Maturana's and Varela's Santiago Theory is a continual bringing forth of the world through the process of living. That the process of living itself is a process of cognition, including perception, emotion, and behavior, which does not necessarily require a brain and nervous system. That even bacteria perceive certain characteristics of their environment. Development is always associated with learning, the two sides of the same coin. As the complexity of a living organism increases, so does its cognitive domain. The brain and nervous system represent a significant expansion of an organism's cognitive domain. At a certain level of complexity, a living organism not only couples to its environment, but also to itself. And that brings forth not only an external, but also an inner world. In human beings, this process of an inner world is intimately linked to language, thought, and consciousness. As said before, according to the Santiago Theory, cognition is not a representation of an independent world, but rather a bringing forth of a world where no objectively existing structures exist independently, but are part of each other in a network of interdependence. We can read in Isis Unveiled that nature is triune. There's a visible objective nature, an invisible indwelling, energizing nature, the exact model of the other, and its vital principle. And above these two, spirit, source of all forces, alone eternal and indestructible. The lower two consistently change. The higher third does not. Everything in the universe progresses steadily in the great cycle, while incessantly going up and down in the smaller cycles as a secret doctrine. Nature is never stationary during Manvantara, as it is ever becoming, not simply being. And mineral, vegetable, and human life are always adapting their organisms to the then reigning elements. And therefore those elements were then fitted for them, as they are now for the life of present humanity. Madame Blavatsky also refers in the footnote to the German metaphysician Hegel, who also stated that nature was a perpetual becoming, which is a purely esoteric conception. And in the Essene Gospel of Peace, Jesus says, I tell you truly, the book of nature is a holy scroll. And if you would have the sons of men save themselves and find everlasting life, teach them how once again to read from the living pages of the earthly mother. Only when he returns to the bosom of his earthly mother will he find everlasting life and the stream of life which leads to his heavenly Father. And in the voice of the silence we can read, help nature and work with her. And nature will regard thee as one of her creators and make obeisance. And she will open wide before thee the portals of her secret chambers. Lay before thy gaze the treasures hidden in the very depths of her pure virgin bosom. Unsullied by the hand of matter, she shows her treasures only to the eye of spirit, the eye which never closes, the eye for which there is no veil in all her kingdoms. And in the Mahatma letters it is said, Thus it is plain that the methods of occultism, though in the main unchangeable, have yet to conform to altered times and circumstances. And at the early stages of the Theosophical movement, a famous document known as the Letter of the Mahachohan, head of the Trans-Himalayan mystics, was passed on to some of the principal workers of that day, which emphasized the doctrine we promulgate, being the only true one, must, supported by such evidence as we are preparing to give, become ultimately triumphant as every other truth. Yet it is absolutely necessary to inculcate it gradually, enforcing its theory, unimpeachable facts for those who know, with direct inferences, deducted from and corroborated by the evidence furnished by modern exact science. And I would like to finish with another axiom from Buddhist sources, which says, life is like a book. Some chapters sad, some happy, and some exciting. But if you never turn the page, you will never know what the next chapter holds.
Oh, thank you so much. In humble awe and gratitude. I never really know what to say, how well you put these together. Thank you, Petra Meyer, for an unbelievable presentation. You illuminate the as above, so below, the macrocosm, the microcosm, far beyond just man and the universe, but all the way down to the tiniest atom, that all is conscious, and the wood wide web. And then you mentioned of the language that has no words. And now I'm feeling guilty about being a vegan because I'm eating these plants that are very intelligent. But I can't thank you enough. No one puts it together quite like you do, Petra.
Yeah,
thank you.
but don't be worried about being vegan, because in the Secret Doctrine, Madame Blavatsky says that plants need the human body to develop further. If, for example, an apple is not eaten, it falls to the ground, it becomes soil again. And this circle can only be broken when it is eaten by a human being or an animal. Then it contributes to forming blood, bones, all the organs. You know, it is a higher level of consciousness, and that is meant to be like that.
Isn't that a wonderful response, that these plants that we are consuming become a higher level by building
Yes.
our bodies?
Yeah.
And you'd mentioned that in class a few weeks back, and oh my gosh, I took some notes, and I just don't know what to say. I always feel so grateful, because the more that I'm able to learn or listen and just be able to understand remotely, the more I see what a miracle every moment is, and what a gift life is. And once we begin to understand what it is that we are, where we are, who we are, where we're going, it's just, I just don't even know what to say. The consciousness within all things. I don't even know if many people go past that. A lot of people, consciousness stops in the human being, but it goes animal, vegetable, mineral, every single thing is alive. Mm-hmm. And oh, you did it so beautifully, sweetheart. Thank you for your time, energy, and effort.
You're welcome.
Glorious. And there's so many quotes. So folks, if you're watching right now and you're thinking, oh, I'd love to see more, just rewind, put it on pause. Petra has a way of weaving in modern day science and historical facts, along with the theosophical quotes, along with quotes that are outside of theosophy. It's all right here for you. And it is such an honor to have her here on another Sunday night, Living Theosophy. And just in thinking about all the things that she mentioned, that the intelligence, I was thinking about how when we move a plant and it goes into shock, how does it know that we moved it from here to there? And then when you speak to plants, how they grow, when you are loving to them and you say, oh, I love you, you're beautiful today, they flourish. My mother used to speak to plants, and the ones that she would love on and sing to always grew just lush. They were lush, and they responded to that love.
Yeah, that is another vibration. If you have, say something with love, or something in anger or whatever. Yes. And that is the auric field where we interchange the information and the vibrations. And I mean, this Dr. Gagliano, she really developed the intuitive perception of plants because she lived with Aborigines for quite a long time and with shamans, and she knows what she's talking about. And that, as a scientist at the beginning, you see how one of her colleagues blatantly mocked her, you know, that is not science, that is a joke.
Yes.
And now he has to roll back.
Brave souls, blazing trails, and science is connecting now with spirituality. They're beginning to meet, intertwine, and this is all divine science and divine knowledge. It is ancient. And thank you so, so much again. Thank you all for being here in the chat with us. Please, 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 if you can, leave a comment if you wish. Share this presentation with somebody else, especially a vegan who might be thinking, you know, what is it that I'm doing? Why am I doing this? I'm doing this for compassion, understanding that the intelligence, as we evolve from mineral and vegetable into animal and man and beyond, it's all part of the divine plan. And this is it's such a gift to have Petra here with us. Sweetheart, are there any closing remarks we'd like to cover before we sign off for tonight? Is there anything else you'd like to add? I can't imagine, but if there is, please let us know.
Yeah, I think I said it more or less all. I was very impressed when I started to come across bioacoustics. That our plants communicate and that the sound can be made audible today with our technology, which wasn't possible.
I know.
Decades ago. Yeah. And our interconnectedness, you know, everything is interconnected. It is a network like the spider webs there.
Yes, it is all woven together, and we must stop destroying it. We must look at what we're doing. We've got to take care of where we live and understand what these plants, what these trees, what these forests, what this is that we are destroying, thinking that we have the right to just dig it out and take it for material gain. We've got to change what we're doing. The time is now for us to pay attention. Theosophy is applicable not only in our everyday life for our personalities, but for the world that we live in. This is essential knowledge for all to have. Thank you, Petra Meyer. I love you more than words can say.
Thank you so much.
Welcome to the end of the video. Here we are backstage at Living Theosophy 2.0. So if you like the video, please like, subscribe, hit the bell icon so you can be notified when Living Theosophy has a brand new video. And there's lots of things happening here at Living Theosophy. And I, for a long time, didn't want to ask if you would like and subscribe because I was trying to be humble. But without the algorithm, these teachings can't get out to where they need to be. So I'm going to say, please like and subscribe. And I look forward to seeing you back here. I love you.